It's great to be back. We are going to shift into focusing on activities to engage teenagers, and it was great to hear all of the ideas that Meredith shared about rapport building, and that's where we're going to start. When we talk about activities, it is so important for all of us to remember that it's really not about the activities, it truly is about the relationship, and we want to keep that in mind throughout. But we know that we need to get teens engaged. And going back to that novelty seeking and interest, we need to pique their interest. And so that's what we're going to focus on. Um, I want to make note of um, how we present our activities, and even how we present them with the words that we use can make a big difference. So presentation in terms of the materials that we might put out there for teens, um, even just our approach and our confidence in ourselves and the ability for us to just be present with the teen makes a big difference. One thing that's really made a difference for me is it was actually a teen here at Wonders and Worries who was talking about if her dad said, "Oh, here's something that I really like. I want to show it to you." She said she was kind of immediately turned off. Like, if my dad likes it, why would I like it? But if he were to say, "Oh, I heard about something that another teen really liked, and I think you might like it," then she was much more interested in checking it out. So when we present an activity, be careful not to say, "I really like this activity," but instead say, "Other teens have really liked this activity." I know with my teens, if I say I like something, they're immediately turned off. So that's a tip you can use. The other piece that's really important is our flexibility and just being prepared, being in that mental place of we can modify, we can get messy. Most teens do enjoy getting messy, and we can get active. So keep those things in mind. We're going to focus on activities in three separate stages. We're going to talk about illness education, and then feelings, and stress and coping. With all of these different categories, we're going to talk about therapeutic goals, which I'm just going to touch on briefly because I think it's things that you know just as child life specialists, and then we'll jump into the activities. So when we think about activities around illness education for teenagers, we want to inform teenagers. There's a lot that they're not going to know, that most of us don't know when we go into a new kind of medical situation. We want to validate what they already understand, validate the confusion that they may have. We want to normalize the experience that they're having. We want to answer their questions and clear up misconceptions. Another note that I want to make is around technology. Um, what's the first thing that a teenager is going to think about if their parent has told them, "I was just diagnosed with lymphoma"? Well, they're going to think, okay, how quickly can I get on my phone or on my computer and look up what lymphoma is? So what we really recommend is to not have parents say, "Don't go online and research," because that won't work. There's no scenario where we can tell a teen, "Don't look this up." They are going to look things up. So instead of approaching it that way, focus on sites that are reputable and informative, and work together with teens, or help parents work together with their teens to find information online that is trustworthy and discuss it together. We can make this fun or make it kind of more competitive. Like, let's see what we can find on this site that isn't accurate or that doesn't match my situation. Let's make a list of the things that are true about what's happening with me and the things that are not true. Many of you may have played the game Two Truths and a Lie with teens that you work with. You can do the same thing with what do we find online. And here, let me tell you what I found on this website, and I'm going to tell you two things that are true and one that's not, and see, play that game with each other and see if the team can figure out which is not accurate. So using it that way instead of the approach of "don't go online," you're going to find a lot of things that you're not going to want to see. It's unlikely that that approach would work. So here's a few activities that to give you some ideas. We love to create what we call Wonders and Worries jars at Wonders and Worries. So these are really question and worry jars. For some teens, and especially tweens and teens, those middle schoolers might be really open to using a jar to kind of hold their questions or hold their worries. We'll present strips of paper and paint pens to decorate the jar. So that might still be something that really fits well for some teens. But others may be like, I'm not really interested in a jar. So we keep a lot of just blank journals, and that can be a way for teens to capture those things that are on their mind, those questions that are on their mind, or those worries, so that the worries don't stay in their head. A journal or a question journal could be something where they write a question and then they give it to their parent, and their parent responds at a time when they can, and it goes back and forth that way, and it takes the pressure off of the teen to have to put into words their question. Or they could go, if you have the opportunity to see a teen several times, you could have them think up questions that they write in their journal, go back to their parent and find the answers, and then come back. Always being aware that some questions don't have exact answers. Why did this happen, or those kinds of things. Um, Treatment center tours, we do sometimes have the opportunity to take teens to treatment centers where they can tour themselves. That's ideal, but there's lots of other options. And so whether it's showing photos or having a virtual reality type experience, or guiding parents to capture information, whether it's little short videos or whether it's selfies with their nurse or their treatment chair that they can then share with their teen. And finding ways for parents and teens to connect when the parent is in the illness environment. So that's something that's very different than traditional work as a child life specialist, where you would be in that illness environment, that medical environment with the teen. Um, Oftentimes the teen doesn't have the opportunity to be in the medical environment. And so how can they learn about it? How can they understand it at the level that's right for them? And really assessing and helping the parent think about, and of course getting the teen's input around how much information do you want. An example of connecting in the medical environment, there was a dad and daughter who just kind of created their own back and forth where they would Snapchat each other in the morning. He was in the hospital in Houston going through a bone marrow transplant. And so she would Snapchat her breakfast to him every morning, and he would Snapchat back a picture of something in his room, and she would try to figure out what it was. Or he might Snapchat a picture of him with the nurse that was taking care of him that day. Games are a great way to just get teens to kind of let their guard down and start to feel comfortable with the interaction. And the picture that you see on this slide was a fun game that was played in one of our groups. And the goal was simply to see how many sticky notes you could fit on a face. So teams paired off and they were kind of competing against other teams in the room and just having fun with it. And the message here is that it doesn't all have to be around the goal that we have. In fact, a lot of the session may be just around a lot of random things. And then we have some time where we're focused on that illness education piece. Another fun game that this particular group played, they put a starburst on their forehead, and it could be any type of food, but we happen to have starburst in our office. So everybody placed a starburst on their forehead and tried to move that starburst to their mouth using only their facial muscles. So that was just a lot of fun and really got everybody lightened up. So those are just a few suggestions. Let's move into activities that engage teenagers around feelings. I think the therapeutic goals will be very familiar to many of you. The goal of expression, providing opportunities for teens to identify and express their emotions, providing normalization to decrease those feelings of isolation that teenagers will have as they go through a parental illness. And then to reflect upon kind of provide that mirror to help them understand more about themselves and gain insight into what their experience is. So let's talk a little bit about some of our favorite activities around feelings. We love to create what we call inner outer feelings masks or inner outer me masks. We've actually attached a handout at the end of the presentation that gives you the details around this activity. The mask that you see on the slide is what we tend to use, and you can find these at like a Hobby Lobby or a Michael's. They're just plastic masks that paint pens work well on, permanent markers work well on, and then we love to have available lots of magazine cutouts and clippings. So we have volunteer groups and other teams that will just clip out sayings and pictures from magazines And you can keep those in a shoebox or in a big Ziploc bag and then just spread them out on the table, and the teens can just look through them and pick the ones that represent them. Be sure to include magazines that would appeal to boys as well. So whether those are automobiles or sports or outdoor magazines or just, a variety of interests, and using Mod Podge to take those magazine clippings and seal them onto the mask or the journal. Journals can be collaged in that way. And jars, we collage all sorts of things. With the inner outer feelings mask, we'll present it as the outside representing the self that they tend to share with most other people, the rest of the world. How would others describe them? What are those feelings that they kind of put out there for the world to see? And then the inside representing more, what do they tend to keep more private that maybe they just share with a few trusted people, or maybe they don't share with anyone. And then, of course, processing that activity with them, which we'll talk about again in a minute. The other thing that can be really helpful, and many teams respond really well to this, is modifying games. So we've modified Feelings Jenga. We've modified the Jenga game, and we call it Feelings Jenga. Many of you, I'm sure, have seen it's pretty popular right now and has been for a while. The giant Jengas at different restaurants and places. We have a giant Jenga as well as just a small tabletop tumbling tower. And you simply just add cards that have feelings questions on them. And it can be a real mixture of just, talk about a happy memory that you have, or a day when you felt confused, and so you can just really mix it up depending on the environment that you're in. And it makes it less threatening when you're playing a game and focusing on the game. And then photography is a lot of fun. And what's great about photography this day and age is that most teens have their phones and are very used to taking pictures, and that's a way of expressing themselves. And then they can teach you, or you may have some fun filters to change things around. And you can use it as a way to say, oh, let's take a picture of you expressing yourself in a certain way, or over exaggerating a feeling, and using it as a way to connect with one another. The last thing I want to say about feelings activities is how colors can be used in lots of different ways for teens to express themselves emotionally. And you can apply this to a variety of different activities, but let's take paints, for example. You could have a variety of paints on the table, and the activity that's coming to mind that just kind of evolved with a teen I was working with is he wanted to do some things with shaving cream. And we had shaving cream, and so he wanted to start to color the shaving cream. And so I just kind of directed it towards, what feeling does that color remind you of? And so, blue might be calm, or red might be angry, and the teen can identify that. And then you can encourage them to put the amount of color in the shaving cream that represents kind of the intensity of that feeling for them. And he ended up just creating this big shaving cream, colorful thing that he put in a pot. And he wanted to freeze it at the end of the activity. We have a refrigerator and freezer in our office. So I was like, sure, we can freeze it. He just wanted to see what would happen and left it there until his next session. But colors can be used in all sorts of ways to really connect back with feelings, and just letting the teen kind of take the lead on where they might want to go with that. So the next category that we want to focus on is stress and coping. And looking at the therapeutic goals, starting with defining stress and coping. Again, really starting at that point of education, really helping teens understand, well, what are we even talking about when we use the word stress? What are we talking about when we use the word coping? And helping teens start to really self-identify those things that cause stress for them, and those go-to coping tools, or how do they tend to want to cope? What are the things that they tend to go to? Do they tend to want to talk, or need a physical outlet, or do something with their hands? Then we want to identify, well, I jumped ahead. We want to identify stressors. That's one of the therapeutic goals. And then, of course, we want to build coping tools. We want to add to the healthy coping tools that they have and strengthen those, and then help them develop new healthy coping tools and practice those coping tools. And then we want to empower them. We want to help them develop coping tools that they can use independently of anybody else, or they can have that list of the support people that they can go to. But it needs to be something that they can control, instead of something that they have to rely on us or someone else in order for it to work well for them. So some of the favorite go-to stress and coping activities, and there's so many. Um, Coping kits as a whole, we love to create coping kits at Wonders and Worries, and there's a wide variety of ways that we could do this. We often use just fiberboard boxes that can also be decorated, and then we have a variety of materials that younger children, but teens can choose from. And we keep separate materials for teens. So it may be things like lotions or, well, bubble wrap can work for all ages. iTunes gift cards if we have somebody donating where they can download specific music. Um, we just keep kind of to the side things that are more appealing, journals that are more teen friendly that might appeal to them more, stress balls that are more teen friendly. And they can pick and choose the things that might work for them and create their own coping kit. They could also just choose one thing that is maybe easy to carry with them or to keep in their backpack. That can be really helpful, or to keep by their bed, that they can use as a way to relax. Screen boxes, if you're not familiar with screen boxes, this can be any type of a cereal box or Kleenex box, and then you take a paper towel roll and you poke that out from a part of the box, and then you fill the box with Kleenex or paper, and then seal everything up except the end of the paper towel roll. And then, of course, teens can decorate it. But it is pretty amazing when you scream into that box. It can be heard, but it's very much muffled. And so it can be a way for those teens who tend to want to express with their voice when they're stressed, where they can scream into that box and maybe not get into trouble doing that. The picture that you see is a pumpkin being smashed. So we love the fall when pumpkins are readily available and donors who want to donate a bunch of pumpkins to us. But there's lots of things that can be smashed. The idea with pumpkin smashing is for the teen to basically capture all those things on the outside of the pumpkin. It can be using paint pens or paint, or they can write words or symbols, however they want to capture it, to just express those frustrations, those stressors, those worries, those fears, and then take that pumpkin and smash it. We actually keep a bat and hammers and the mallets and all sorts of different tools that, of course, we need to use safely. And we're fortunate in that we have an outdoor area. But if you don't have an outdoor area, you can spread, and we've done this before on bad weather days, you just spread a big kind of drop cloth and let teens get messy and then just wrap it all up. The other way we can alter the activity with pumpkins is to scoop out all the goop on the inside and talk about how that can represent a lot of the goop that we might carry with us, or kind of those goopy feelings, and it can be really helpful to get that out and how that feels. Um, the pottery can also be smashed, like those terracotta pots. You can write on those and smash those, and that can be very cathartic. I want to go back real quick to the coping kits. Another really fun thing to do with coping items is actually pre-freeze them, or if you have the opportunity to work with a teen over multiple sessions, they could choose coping items that you then freeze in a big block of ice. And then what they do is you give them a hammer and like some kind of a chipper, and they can chip out the coping items. So anything where you can combine physical activity with a goal is often something that teens are much more excited about and engaged in. Games like stress bingo, clay sculpting, anytime we can turn something into a physical activity like I just mentioned, and I'll mention a few more ideas for that, and then we'll wrap up the activities portion. One thing that's worked really well for us is taking dart guns, and most teens still love dart guns, and those that have the suction cups, if you can shoot those at a mirror or something glass, they'll stick. But you can also shoot them at a poster board, and those dabber paints, or you can just use regular paint and paint on the end of that dart. And then when the teen shoots that dart, it leaves a paint spot, and that can be really cathartic and rewarding. I remember working with a 13-year-old boy whose mom was going through breast cancer treatment, and he'd also had an injury to his knee, and sports had been his outlet, and he was very concerned about how he was going to cope in a healthy way without having his outlet. And so we tried this with the dart guns, and he loved it. And immediately he wanted to tell his parents and kind of set up a place at home where he could do the same thing at home. Even just interacting through talking, and like Meredith was talking about before, having something that you can connect with, but passing a ball back and forth, being able to shoot baskets if you have that opportunity, even on the back of a door, basketball net. All of those kinds of things can really make a difference in teens being able to connect with you, but also express what's going on for them. So in wrapping up this section, the the overall key as we're utilizing these activities is that we do provide that reflective validation experience for the teen. Going back to the brain, that's what really allows teens to integrate what's happening, to integrate their experience and to what's called myelinate. We didn't talk about myelination, but it's really strengthening those pathways between I get stressed and then I go to this coping tool. And the more that we can help them have an internal experience with, oh, I got stressed, so I put my stressors on a piece of paper and I ripped those up, then that's going to become their pathway, that healthy pathway instead of an unhealthy coping tool where, oh, when I get stressed, then I go and I sneak out or I skip school or I use drugs or alcohol. Um, so just wrapping it all up around it is the rapport that we have with teens, and then it's really allowing them to experience and process and self-reflect on what they've gone through can make significant change, and can kind of counteract some of the things that that are happening biologically for them and driving them. Okay, we're going to shift back to Meredith and shift to when a parent is at an end of is in an end of life situation.